I used to waste hours planning a colour scheme, even painting multiple test models, then changing my mind and starting again. Eventually, through indecision, I'd either lazily fall back on copying the box art or someone else's paint job. It never occurred to me to use the 2D colour method I'd used in design for many years, on 3D models. So today we're going to talk about two things: colour theory and the 60-30-10 rule. And it's not going to be how you expect, because I'll let you into a little secret. I don't believe in colour theory. Hi, I'm Will and you're watching The State of Play, and as this video has been requested more times than I can count, I thought it was about time we took a dive into colour theory. My way. That annoying part of our hobby that seems to make sense on paper, and then when you try to put it into practice, everything you thought you knew just dissolves on the end of your brush. I usually try to teach colour theory by stealth. It's carefully peppered into my ink mixing video and my priming video because it's a topic that you either get immediately or it just continues to confound you forever and a day. Just when you think you've got it, a design comes along that breaks the so-called theory. I mean, I never understood why it's called colour theory. Why is it not called colour fact? The only answer I could come up with is it can't be called colour fact when any piece of art can be instantly and degradingly dismissed just by someone saying, "I don't like it." If something can be disproved that quickly, I guess theory is the best name for it. Colour harmonies are one of the most subjective things on this planet. One person's majestic pink and orange sunset is another person's ew. Colour theory tells us that colours work together in specific harmonies, patterns, and even symbolism, and we all just nod along. Even as a designer, I never bought into the old red makes you feel hot, blue makes you feel cold. No, temperature makes you feel cold. If you're sitting in a blue room feeling cold, put the heating on. Much of colour theory is based on what long-dead ancestors observed in nature. Aristotle, Isaac Newton, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. But if you don't like the interaction between colours, no amount of theory is going to convince you otherwise. Colour science, however, the more modern take, gives us more functional applications, so we can reproduce colours accurately in optics and lighting, for example. It's much more objective. So we could say that colour theory is about subjective feelings and colour science is about objective fact. But neither of these helps us decide what colours to paint a squad of Corsair Void Scarred, does it? These here are probably all the colour theory harmonies you're used to seeing. Monochromatic, analogous, complementary, split complementary, triadic, tetradic, also known as square, and rectangle. Forget most of them. I don't want to do a video on all these colour harmonies any more than you want to watch yet another one, because unless you're designing a flag where no one colour is really dominant, often choosing between these harmonies is just a confusing waste of your time. I do want to do a super quick overview of colour wheels, however, because they're an incredibly handy tool to have available and they're not all the same. RGB, red, green, blue, is for screens, phones, TVs, tablets. It's not for paints, so just ignore it. In our hobby, there's two we can choose from: the RYB wheel, red, yellow, blue, and the CMY wheel, cyan, magenta, yellow. Now realistically, it really doesn't matter which of the two you go with, as the theoretical harmonies will still work. You'll just get slightly different complementary hues. And on a 2-inch miniature surrounded by other 2-inch miniatures on a tabletop scattered with 5-inch terrain, no one's going to give a shit. I use CMY mainly because I come from a print design background and because, well, it can mix many more colours than RYB. But honestly, my main reason for using CMY is that I think the RYB complementaries have become recognisably overused. Red and green always reminds me of Christmas. Yellow and purple, the comic book Joker, and blue and orange is almost every movie poster of the last 20 years. Once you see it, it's really hard to unsee. So I'm giving CMY its chance in the spotlight. The basic structure of a colour wheel is super simple. You have your 3 primaries equally spaced around a circle, a wheel, in my case cyan, yellow and magenta. Mixing 2 primaries gets you the secondaries, and mixing again gets you the tertiaries, and so on and so forth. You can keep mixing forever and a day to get a much more complex and more useful colour wheel. But you use whichever wheel you like, just grab one with enough colours on it to be useful, something like the real colour wheel. Not something like this, which is too simple and of no real use to anyone other than kindergarten. If used right, colour wheels are a great way of taking the thinking out of picking colours. When we're painting models, we kinda need to have a dominant colour so they stand out on a tabletop or display shelf, a secondary colour to complement the main colour, and an accent colour or two to break up the monotony. And then we fill in all the spare bits using neutral hues that won't clash. I mean, we don't have to do any of that, but an orc with green skin, green weapons, green clothes and a green base would look like a wonderful monochromatic colour harmony, but like a ridiculous green blob during a game of Kilty. What I want to do is give you some jumping off points you can follow that should work most of the time on whatever it is that you're painting, especially when trying to work your way through more models than Hugh Hefner in the 1970s. You might have heard this mentioned before, but in the design world we have what's called the 60-30-10 rule. Again, another thing with rule or theory stuck at the end of its name. It's not a rule, it's a guide. And it can be used to create simple 3-colour balanced schemes. Let's just steal it for miniatures. But this is where 60% of your subject is a main colour, a dominant colour. 30% is a secondary colour and 10% is an accent colour. It makes the choices you have to make on your models much more decisive. Now it's called the 60-30-10 rule, but as I said, it's more of a guide because it could just as easily be 75-25 or 50-45-5. It's just a way for you to visualise and plan which parts of a model could be which colour. It's not fixed. In fact, I quite often like to plan and visualise with 60-30-10-10 so I can have 2 accent colours. And yes, I know this doesn't add up to 100%, but I'm painting tiny plastic armies, not trying to make mathematically accurate pie charts. In mini painting, the main colour is often dictated by your model, making this even quicker. Space Marines usually have predetermined colour schemes, so you don't need to do too much colour theory with those, unless you're creating your own chapter. But something like an orc being mainly green, or a dark oath barbarian with mostly skin, still needs you to pick all the colours for clothing and equipment, and have them look coherent in a squad or in an army. However, when there's no obvious main colour or you want your very own colour scheme, picking just one dominant colour is much quicker than choosing many different colours. And then we can use the very subjective colour theory to pick the other colours for us. This is where those colour harmonies come in handy. Let's look at them again and dump the ones that don't immediately help. Monochromatic, analogous and complementary. Great harmonies to use as we progress as painters, but let's be honest, aren't really going to help when we're looking for 3 different complementary colours for our 60-30-10 rule. Now, don't dismiss them fully, you can do it, but not for this video. So we're left with these 2, split, complementary and triadic, which work in 3s, perfect for our 60-30-10 rule, and these 2, tetradic and rectangle, that work in 4s, my version of the 60-30-10-10. Everyone still with me? Because it starts to get a little subjective and complex from here. This is where I start making decisions that break the theory and are either going to be loved or utterly despised. Because, well, I simply can't be bothered with 4 different choices of colour harmony, so I'm just going to merge them into only 2 choices and create a totally different set of shapes to use with the colour wheel. Instead of these 2, I'm combining them to make this shape. And instead of these 2, I'm merging them into this. I'm going to call these rounded triangle and rounded quad. And the reason for these weird additions on the endpoints is because I want to be able to play with colour options on or around those areas. Call me out on my bull here, but my illogical logic tells me that if I pick a dominant colour and this colour complements it, and this colour also complements it, then surely that means both colours complement it. The same would therefore apply for the other side of the triangle, and would work in the same way for the quad too. Now we only really need to use 2 harmonies, and we can easily have our secondary colours and accent colours picked for us by simply picking out our dominant colour. But the astute among you will be saying, hold up, if you start messing with the exact colours, you won't get the harmony across all 3 or 4 colours anymore. And this is what I mean by breaking the theory, because in my opinion, at the ratios we plan to use these colours, 60-30-10, maybe with another 10, there's just not enough of a colour shift for it to be noticeable. Is there really that much difference between a layered up red and a layered up orange when they're both the size of a pinhead? But you know what? All this theory is great, but eventually you have to pick a set of colours for yourself. So let's pick some so you can judge for yourself if it'll work for you. First with the rounded triangle to create a 60-30-10 scheme. Let's say I want red as the colour I want you to see first, the dominant colour. And I placed my rounded triangle on my colour wheel with red at the top. The other rounded corners of our triangle point to both secondary and accent colours, and they can be interchangeable. One can be the secondary and one can be the accent. It doesn't matter which, just pick. And because I decided to make these rounded corners and not precise pointing arrows, I can use all these potential colours to paint my model. So on this Genestealer Magus, the main colour is red, the secondary colour is blue, and the accent colour is green. But you could just as easily have green as the secondary colour and blue as the accent. You can even argue there's a second accent colour of yellow, in the gold. Which brings us onto rounded quad. For a 60-30-10-10 design, we can use all these options by having two accent colours. The dominant colour on this Slanesh Keeper of Secrets being mainly purple, then a deep burgundy red secondary colour, and two accents, one blue, one yellow, as gold. One of the things that holds many people back, as far as I'm concerned, is they become wedded to the exact colour and exact shade and exact saturation they've picked on a colour wheel. And what really helps as an artist is just to ballpark it. But take this complementary set here. The greens can be ballparked, so we can slap on some greeny yellows, dark greens, desaturated greens, or even old green golds. The reds can be ballparked, so we can throw in some crimsons, pinks, or rusts in various forms of vibrancy. And finally, a bunch of blue violets, letting us chuck in some accents in blues and purples and even silvers and steels. Take this guy for example, the Lord of Blights. Both his armour and skin look green. It's not the same shade of green, in fact the armour leans more towards turquoise, but the overall effect is one of green taking up around 60% of the model. We can also see the ballparked reds, orange rusts and pinks at around 30%, and there's even accented hints of the blues in the form of oxide and silvers at 10%. Oh, and don't forget, yellows and greens can be variations of gold. Orange can be copper and brass and rust, and silvers and steels can be variations of blue. Just like these Golden Stormcast, which use these three complementary colours, where the dominant colour is yellow-gold, the secondary colour is blue, and the accent colour is red, which is the exact same harmony used on ultramarines, just in a different order, blue being the dominant colour. The secondary colour is yellow-gold, and the accent is red, which is exactly the same as Space Wolves, just with a lighter desaturated blue. Now I know, much of this might come over as a massive oversimplification of colour theory, but as I said before, theory, not fact. And we're trying to work our way through vast piles of shame here. We're not trying to become Da Vinci. Whatever works, works. But what about browns, whites, greys and blacks, I hear you ask? Well, these are neutral hues, so pretty much complement every colour. I say complement, but a better description would probably be won't clash. And actually, the same kind of goes for metallics if they don't make up the mainstay of your model. A silver or gold can be sneaked in and not clash with your dominant, secondary or accent colours because they'll subtly reflect the colours around them anyway. That's actually for metallic paint, not non-metallic metal. That one needs to be factored into your colour harmony for it to work well. You can throw neutral colours liberally into your 60-30-10 mix as extras, usually for boots, helmets, belts, guns and dangly adornments or motifs. You can even use your neutral as one of your main colours, so if you don't like one of the 60-30-10 colours the colour wheel picked for you, just replace it completely with a white, grey, black or brown, like on these Eldari whose helmet, shoulders and belt are white instead of what should have been a green. Or replace two of the colours, like this. Now brown is a composite colour, so if you take this Gut Ripper, which is using green as its dominant colour, purple as its secondary, and red as the accent, you might find yourself going, "Hey, what? That's not purple, mate. It's brown." Yes, you're correct. Here's the same process on the Hernken Jaegers, at least I think that's how you pronounce it. Orange, turquoisey blue, and purple. Except again, it's not purple, it's brown. Even Space Marines use this method of replacing a main colour with a neutral. Blood Angels have effectively replaced the blue in their harmony with a black, as have Imperial Fists. In fact, the vast majority of Space Marine chapters are almost all variations of the same three complementary colours, over and over again. Cutting a long story short, neutral hues and browns can be used liberally to fill a load of gaps on minis. That makes these colours great for pouches, belts, horns, boots, staffs and ropes, and those million other adornments that Games Workshop now slaps on every single model. The way I always look at it is this. If it's not part of a model I want to stand out, it's going neutral. So you can easily throw these into the mix with the 3 or 4 ballparked colours in the scheme you've already chosen. Using the process in this video means you can pick out 3 or 4 paint colours, a white, black and a few browns, and get all your base coats done with almost no thinking. A very good way of sorting this whole process in your head is to go and grab some images of painted models from, say, the Warhammer website, and try to figure out which harmony they used, especially if the model has lots of neutrals on it. In fact, I just picked up this, which has loads of great images in it, because after 35 years in this hobby, it turns out I never bothered learning anything about species, races or factions I never painted or played. I bought this myself because I thought it would be a very good way to get my kids into Warhammer, same way I got them into Marvel with a very similar book. Now I say that, but I have 2 girls, and when I said there was an emperor, they immediately wanted to see some princesses. And I admit, I was stuck. Now, I know this video isn't classic colour theory as you might know it. In fact, I've taken some incredible liberties, but our job is to use colour to get our models painted. If I have to bend, break, or outright destroy a few rules and theories to get them done, well, goddammit, I'm gonna do it. Okay, I guess you can go now unless you fancied sticking around to subscribe, like, comment, or share the video. If you are still here, then do consider joining my Patreon, because if I had to fund my channel with what YouTube gives me, it'd all be stickman drawings and a cheap-sounding AI voice.
And if you want, you can visit my website and pick up some hobby tools, painting supplies, books and more. Every little bit helps the channel.
Now that's the state of play for today. I'll catch you next time.